I'm here with Brian Michaud, Greg Levitz, and myself. And tonight we're going to be talking about and discussing dive buddies, dive partners, and dive teams. And why it's important, what's important about it, things to look for when you're selecting a dive buddy, partner, or team, and things, more importantly, things to look out for. So you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you're putting yourself in danger. So we're gonna give you a few things to look at and look for, so you don't make any bad, I guess, choices or decisions before you ever get in the water.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, let's talk about dive buddies. Okay, now my understanding, and my understanding. I don't know what the other word I'm looking for is. Every agency suggests highly that you dive with a buddy, except for TDI. Didn't want to mention it. It's okay. Except for TDI, they offer a solo diving course. Once you take that solo course, then it's trusted that you're at least competent enough to dive by yourself. So, am I correct in that understanding? Brian, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, definitely as a recreational diver, working your way up through, definitely having a buddy. There's just so many things that a buddy can do for you that would be difficult on your own. So, having that buddy is certainly a nice piece of safety equipment.
But as far
as long as it's a good buddy.
But okay, so before we go there, as far as every agency that I know of recommends diving with a buddy, do you guys know anything different? Have you heard anything different?
No, I haven't heard anything.
No? Okay. So with that being said, Brian, you touched on it. So what goes into, and we're gonna be talking about all levels of diving tonight. So from basic open water through technical, through expeditions, because expeditions is where your team is going to come in. But let's start with open water. Okay. Now, open water. I guess I want to go with your opinion first. I know my opinion. So, Greg, what's your opinion on a dive buddy for open water? Basic open water through
Sure.
advanced open water.
All right, so let's tell the story of when I was becoming an open water diver. I think that'll probably help.
Greg loves stories.
Well, I think it will paint the picture of you go to a class. Sometimes you know somebody, and you're going to the class with them.
Yep.
Sometimes you don't. So in my case, I knew a few people. I knew 3 people of out of the class, and we became dive buddies for only a short time after. And then all of a sudden you start to hang out with the folks at the dive shop.
Yeah.
And then you try to find somebody who's going, and it's typically you're trying to hang out. This is typically what happens. You're hanging out with the dive master that'll take you on your Wednesday night dive for a little while until you can actually, until you actually get a dive buddy. There's so many different types of dive buddies. The buddy who is always there, just he's on time, he's always there. There's the dive buddy that says he's going to be there and never shows. There's the dive buddy that will show sometimes and last minute will cancel on you. And so I think we've all gone through those things. It's rare to find a dive buddy that is on the same I don't know if level, I guess maybe the same level of thinking of if you say you're going to be somewhere and you're going to be there. Let's meet in Jamestown. Let's whatever we do. So, my experience was I had a dive buddy for a little while, then I didn't have one. Then I went to look for a dive buddy, and then I took my advanced course, and then I had a dive buddy for a while, and then they went their separate way because something was more fun to them.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't diving, you know.
So Brian, what do you think?
I Greg's outlined it like perfectly. That seems to be the progression of how things go with dive buddies. I know the guy that I took my open water class with. We're still good friends, but we haven't dove together. His last dive's got to be 15 years ago, maybe more. And when I started to advance, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take my advanced open water. You want to take it with me? He's like, nah, I really don't want to. All right. So then that's when I got hooked up with the shop, and my dive buddy very quickly wound up becoming my instructor. I should say the instructor. So, Bert and I wound up within the couple of years that I went and worked my way up through Dive Master. There was a couple of people in that class that we kind of started together and went all the way through together. So there were 4 or 5 of us that dove together throughout all of that. Of all of us that did that, I'm the only one that's still at the shop. Everyone else is gone. They have moved away. They're still diving. They're just not diving in our area. They don't live around here anymore. They're gone. And now, when I think about who my dive buddies are now, they're fellow instructors. Just because the way things work out, that's what works. Occasionally maybe one of the students for a while that'll, hey, let's go diving, and we kind of dive together, but like if I want to go on a dive for me that doesn't involve leading or being a dive professional at the moment, then I'm diving with one of the instructors. And sadly, that doesn't happen as often as I would like. Most of our diving is around teaching at this point, but you've got those buddies that do that migrate through.
Gonna change.
Yes, that's what I am hoping for. But yeah, the buddies come and go, and trying. I don't know that you'll ever have that one lifelong dive buddy. You might still be lifelong friends, but it's rare to find that dive buddy that's gonna stick with you a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, so true.
So I actually started out diving on the complete opposite side of the scale. I didn't have a dive buddy. I didn't sign up with anyone. I went into diving. Knowing that I was probably going to be diving by myself most of the time. Let's step back a minute and say, every agency that we know of suggests and recommends diving with a dive buddy at all times.
But Todd,
Yep.
Let me, simple question.
Yep.
In your case, you had a different schedule than most.
Yep.
And it was very, from what I remember, because I think I started diving with you after your advanced open water.
I started diving with you 4 years after I started diving.
Right. So, and I think your schedule, like you really wanted midday. Not many people have a midday open.
Yes, for most of my, I would say for most of the first 10 years, I was diving every weekend at least.
Yeah.
And I would sometimes go during the week. I get out of work early and I go to Jamestown. I would go diving. Or I'd go to Niantic and I'd go diving. So yes, but that's why I wanted to say, when I started diving, I didn't sign up with anyone. I didn't have a buddy in mind. I took it for what it was worth. I'm going to be diving by myself most of the time.
Right.
So I guess let's also go on top of that, that absolutely diving with buddies and friends and partners and teams is a lot more enjoyable.
It is, but have you ever noticed that you've gone on a boat? Let's say you sign up for a boat dive and your buddy doesn't show and he calls you last minute. I'm not going to go. You get there, you're paired up now because the boat says, hey, listen, you got to have a dive buddy. You got to have a dive buddy getting in and coming out kind of thing.
Once again, every dive boat I've been on, they never paired you up. You might have splashed with someone,
Yeah.
but it wasn't here. You guys are buddying up. The next two are up. Okay, you're in.
Yeah.
With that being said, that was all New England diving. So I knew the boat operators. I knew the shops. I don't want to say I got special treatment, but I never noticed any of those rules.
Yeah.
My first dive out of New England, I was an instructor.
Right.
So when I went to Florida, I was diving with a student, or I was diving once again by myself, just because of the dives I was doing.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you made the comment. You made the comment last week, and we wanted to expand on that this week. You made the comment, there's only a few people that I will dive with. So, what makes that special dive buddy or partner in your eyes?
I know it. I know the answer, Brian. I know the answer. It's the guy who brings the food and the drinks, right? Your dive buddy?
The drinks. Well, let me qualify that just a little bit, because I'll dive with anybody. As an instructor, I'll dive with anybody, and I have had wow for students.
Yep.
So chasing someone out in the Atlantic because they came up the wrong side and they're heading away from the dive boat. But anyway, if I'm picking someone to come dive with me and to be we're going for fun. There's nothing class related about this. We're going for fun. I do look for someone that could at least, for lack of better words, keep up with me.
Mm-hmm.
My wife dives. She'll only dive with me or Bert.
Mm-hmm.
If one of us is not in the water, she ain't getting in the water. If I want to go and go do something cool, go do something fun.
You're saying
sorry, hon, you're not coming in the water.
You can't do anything cool and fun with the wife. Okay. We're gonna send Penny a copy of this later.
It's just she's too nervous about it.
Yep.
Getting in the water with you, getting in the water with Bert, there's zero concern. You don't have the, are they okay? Are they on my shoulder? Are things going to plan?
Mm-hmm.
You just know, you barely turn your head, you're right there. Or if it's, a night dive when we have our lights on, you don't even have to look for them because you see it's amazingly stress-free.
Mm-hmm.
I went out to California as an early diver. I just had my advanced open water card, and I got paired up on the boat because I showed up by myself. The guy that I got paired up with was someone who dove off that boat twice a week. Dive operator said he's a great guy. Have fun. You don't have to worry about him. He'll keep an eye out on you, just whatever. Well, this guy is by far the worst buddy I've ever dove with. He had one thing in mind. He cared nothing about where I was. as he darted off to go do his thing, there was never a turn back to see if I was still there, keeping up with him, whatever. No discussion about what he wanted to do underwater. I'm like, hey, I'm just up for a quick tour of it was a kelp forest. I just want to do a swim around, see what's down there. He went, yeah, sounds good. We can do that. And that's not what he did at all.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Going back for a minute. So what do you look for in a dive buddy?
Someone that's going to do what they say.
Yep.
And someone that is, I would say, similarly skilled.
Okay.
Not that I have an issue taking an advanced open water diver out who maybe they've got 500, 1,000 dives. They may not have all the C cards, but their skills should certainly be a competent diver.
Mm-hmm.
So looking for somebody that is competent, that will carry out the dive plan, whatever that may be, and someone that I don't have to worry about. Are we going to stay together? Am I going to spend my dive looking for them?
Okay.
You know, we're swimming along and all of a sudden they take a turn and off they go without signaling, hey, let's go this way. They just go. That's the thing I look for. I look for someone that's willing to make the commitment for that half hour that we're underwater. Yeah, we're sticking together. You want to go somewhere different? Fine. Let me know so that we both go together. That's what I look for, that communication, and you can generally tell when you're talking to somebody whether or not they're going to be the person that's going to say, okay, hey, I saw this cool fish, let's go that way. Or, you know, whatever. You get that vibe from them that, okay, we are similar, we are of similar mind, that we will be able to do this dive and enjoy the dive together because we kind of think along the same wavelength. You get somebody that's doesn't think the way you do, that doesn't have similar interests. You want to go lobstering, they want to go take pictures. You're not doing that on the same dive. Not
lobstering.
Well, you know, if they want to do that, that's one thing. But you know, if they're into the macro stuff and they want to get up close and you're banging around with a tickle stick,
yeah,
you know, so it's that kind of thing.
So, Greg, what do you look for in a dive buddy?
Yeah, somebody who's squared away.
Okay.
I mean, it all starts with obviously the conversation, but somebody who's squared away, who can actually come up with a really sensible dive plan. You know, whether it's what pressure we turning, you know, what's our goal in this whole thing? Do we have a goal, or are we just going to go down? And I mean, every dive that you should have some type of goal in mind. You know, whether it's a rock pile or not, there should be something. And then emergency procedures. Are we all on the same page? What happens if we get separated? If we get separated, how long are we going to look? What's our turn pressure going to be? I mean, that's really, and if they don't understand any of that, they're probably not going to end up being a good dive buddy. And so I think that's always, you know, one of the first things. I mean, we teach that in open water. We teach that in advanced, you know, how to be a good dive buddy, how to be a good diver. You're going to find people throughout everybody's dive career that just could care less about the other person and only really care about themselves. And that's not somebody who I want to hang out with. I think that's with anything, whether you're a mountain biker or a skier or anything. I mean, it's every sport. You know, you want to hang out typically with people that you can trust, and that, you know, if something happens, they could potentially handle it. I think that's the whole idea.
Okay, so Brian, just to recap a little bit, Brian, your primary interest is someone that you don't have to worry about, someone that's relatively at the same level as you, so you can actually relax and enjoy your dive. Because we've all had the students that anytime you have a student, your primary focus is on that student. You're not enjoying your dive, bottom line.
No.
So basically, same thing. Anytime you're diving with someone anytime you're diving with someone that hasn't had the same training or is going through that training or isn't at your level yet, I guess the easiest way for me to do this is I would feel very comfortable after working on land, but I would feel very comfortable in a cave with Greg. Greg's had a cave course. Greg's had similar training to what I've had as far as Cave 1. I think you went even further, didn't you? Okay. So, Brian, I would be on edge with you in a cave. I'd be watching out for you. I wouldn't care what was going on as far as, ooh, ah, look at that's pretty. I would be, okay, is Brian okay?
Yeah.
So now we're gonna go. What do I look for in a dive buddy? And surprisingly, I've met all my dive buddies either through teaching or I showed up at a dive site where, Greg, did I meet Jacob with you?
We were in Gloucester, right? We were,
No, Jamestown.
no, I don't think it was, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were in Gloucester on the polling.
No.
Right, it was Jamestown.
Yep. And Jacob asked if he could join us.
That's right.
So Jacob actually became one of my dive buddies.
Yeah.
I would go diving all the time with him. So surprisingly, me going out with the intention on, hey, I'm diving alone again, or I was there to do something else, I met dive buddies and I met some incredible divers just being around and diving. I didn't have a plan beforehand, but you know, we dove with each other. We had a good conversation. We had a good time, and we became dive buddies. So that's my story. So we'll go to Greg this time. Greg, what do you look for someone or what do you look out for?
Oh, you know, it's the clumsy guy. It's the guy that can't put his regulator on correctly. I'm looking.
Wetsuit on backwards?
It could be backwards. It could be upside down. Who knows? You know, who has his hose, you know, all over the place.
Did we tell you about that, Brian?
What's that?
I did a rescue class with Greg. Greg was my rescue instructor. We had a kid who was advanced open water. He was, you know, he thought he was it. He put his wetsuit on backwards.
Makes it easy to pee.
Yeah.
We couldn't get our cameras out fast enough. So, but so a quick side note. I look for someone that I can have a good time with, that I can joke around with.
Right.
You know, that someone does something stupid and you bust his butt and he's okay with it.
Yeah.
Because you would do the same thing if it was you.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, but go ahead, Greg.
No, it's right, but you know, there are some funny stories about things. There are definitely some funny stories, but you know, you try to stay away from the guy who has all the brand new gear and has no idea how to put it together, or walks in with the tag still on. I can't tell you how many folks you see with hoods that have tags on them to put them on. Oops, I forgot to take the tag. Little things like that kind of go through your mind, like, you know, maybe they're just not really that squared away, or maybe they're new to wearing a hood, or whatever the situation is. But you're right.
But to piggyback on that, that's not a definitive disqualifier, because I could have just bought a brand new hood at the dive shop because I forgot mine at home.
Yeah, that's not a disqualifier by any means.
It makes you
the guy that knows everything. You know, it's, oh, I've been here before, been here 1,000 times, and then instead of walking down the boat ramp, takes the hard path to get in the water. You're like, what do you mean you've been here 1,000 times? I mean, come on. or the guy that just doesn't, or girl that just doesn't really get it. But you know, level for me, I've been diving with all different all different types of folks.
Yep.
So it doesn't really matter to me. I'll take an open water student or a
Well, hang on.
certified.
But once again, we're talking about you diving for your recreation.
Right.
So, what do you when you're, I don't know, what do you look out for? What do you, and you said someone with brand new gear would, make you think, make you question. Someone that didn't know how to put their gear together would make you kind of hesitant, kind of question, hey, what's going on?
A prime example. This is like the easiest, funniest thing, and you see it all the time. If you go to Jamestown on any given Saturday, and you walk around and you watch people put their BC onto the tank, and you realize that they're not actually tightening the band, the cam band. It's like super loose. They don't know how to use it and put it together. Well, though they just might be new to the whole sport, and
right.
They might be just fine in the water, but you're never really gonna know until you get in the water with somebody.
Right.
And that's the other funny part. So you can get into the water. You could be in the parking lot and they look so, I've had this happen 1,000 times. They look so squared away. And you get into the water and it's completely different. Hello. Unmute.
Yeah. Do you hear me? Hello?
How you doing?
Very good. I'm a little late. I wanted to join, but I just got the notification. I was a little busy.
No problem. We're talking. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
We're talking about dive buddies. Basically, and we're with Brian. So Brian, what do you look out for as far as a dive buddy? What do you try to stay away from?
The guy that seems to know it all on land, and as soon as you see him walk into the water, you realize, yeah, no. One individual pops into mind when we think about the poor buddy. Always has every newest piece of gear, doesn't understand why he's buying it, doesn't really know what it's used for, but he read somewhere that you gotta have it. And so he goes out and gets it and installs it in his gear rig, and now it's oh, hey, can you help me use this? Well, what is it, first off? Like, that kind of thing. Because now with something like that, you're no longer going and enjoying your dive. You're now back to being an instructor and being on edge, watching this guy while you go on your dive. The new tag thing, like Greg mentioned, did used to bug me. That was something I looked for. But then at our shop, I can't tell you how many times we show up for checkouts and the owner of the shop comes out and he's like, oh, hey guys, and this is to the staff, I got this new thing in. I want you all to try it. Give me a feedback on it because I want to know if I'm going to bring it into the store. And it might be gloves, hoods. He did that with my reg. Showed up, here's a new reg. You're going to dive this reg. It's supposed to be awesome. So I can't tell you how many times I showed up, whether at the pool or out doing checkouts, and I'm wearing 6 brand new pieces of gear that I'm pulling the tags off of, and we're setting them up just because the order just came in the night before. We didn't have a chance to check it out ahead of time, and you know, now here we are doing it live as we go. So when that started happening, I kind of stopped. You know, the tags and the brand new gear that doesn't look like it's ever been used stopped being a flag for me, just because I know I stood out a bunch of times as a flag for everyone else when I was the one leading the, you know, being the instructor leading the dive. But yeah, looking out for that guy that oh, I got this, I know about all this, and then you're watching him and you're like, wow, that doesn't work. It's not going to work that way. That to me is one of the biggest things. And when you're talking to him, you can tell that a lot of what he's saying is being made up on the spot, that it's not legit. It just doesn't add up.
Okay.
How about when you're at Jamestown or wherever you are and you say to the new guy, have you seen that car out there? And they're like, oh, I've seen it 1,000 times. There's no car.
I wish I'd seen it.
Okay, so I have a little different approach. Really, once again, I'm diving by myself. So I'll show up at a dive site. If someone wants to dive with me, I don't have a problem doing it. I'll be very cautious during that first dive, but during that first dive allows me to see how they are in the water, how they are at assembling their gear, as Greg mentioned, what kind of gear they have, as Brian mentioned. But instead of trying to pick out a dive buddy, I'll dive with basically anyone, and then I make my decision on, will I ever dive with that person again? You know, but that's just me.
Yeah.
But once again, on that first dive, I'm going to be very cautious. I'm going to be not focusing on ooh, ah, pretty. I'm going to be focusing on that dive buddy to see how he'll be as a future dive buddy.
I had a dive buddy once show up in his wetsuit, drove all the way 2 hours wearing his wetsuit.
But I had to show up. I had to wear my dry suit. I forgot why, but I drove a half hour with my dry suit on.
Yeah.
I don't remember why I had to do that.
If it's nice and cold out.
You didn't want to disconnect the P valve?
I made the quick disconnect for mine, so
Yeah, I don't have that yet.
Wow.
I still couldn't get it off though, but you know.
Okay, so we know what we're looking for. We know what we're not looking for. So now going beyond recreational diving, getting into technical diving. When selecting a buddy, you're always going to dive to the level of the less experienced person or less qualified person. You can enjoy all kinds of dives, but you just can't bring that person out of their comfort zone. Just because you've been to 300 feet doesn't necessarily mean that person's comfortable at 300 feet. So once again, when we start technical diving, we're always going to dive to the ability of the less experienced person. So Brian, what does that progression look like for you?
Well, having just completed all my academics for tech diving, we've got some dives to do. But what's neat is looking at that progression where, okay, our first few dives, we're going to be 60, 70 feet. Doing the shakeouts, doing the, am I squared away?
Yep.
Then we're going to get into that, the simulated decompression. Can I do what needs to be done in a simulated situation?
Okay.
And then we're actually going to go and do those deco dives. So by having a progression like that, you get used to doing the depth. You're going to be getting used to pushing a little further, advancing, pushing a little further, advancing. So by the point where here's your card, unlike an open water class where we take you out for the weekend, give me 5 dives, and chances are you're going to pass the skills you need to do. This is going to be a series of dives over a period of time. So your skills are really going to be there, and your comfort at the depth, your comfort in the situation, whether it be, looking at a wreck or going into a cave or whatever it is, you're building that comfort level with the student while you're doing it. So later, you find someone that's similarly certified. The hope is that they really should be fairly comfortable and competent doing whatever dive you're planning. Hey, we're planning to go to 250 feet to go look at this wreck. We're not going to go inside it on this trip because we've never been here. So we just want to see what it's all about. That shouldn't be too difficult for anyone that holds a card to do that style dive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that at that level, most of your divers, now there's always the exception to the rule, but most of your divers should be able to do that comfortably. Teaming up with someone who's cave certified to go deep on a reef, well, for them that may be a little less exciting than going into a cave. But then again, if we're doing the depth, we're doing a decompression dive, there's still that technical aspect to it that, everybody should still be squared away on.
Real quick, I'm sorry. How do you say your name, sir?
He's on mute.
He's on mute.
Yeah.
Alex.
Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, what level are you certified to?
Advanced certified nitrox as well.
Okay. Good. So open water.
Advanced open water.
Okay.
Nitrox, that's the last one that I got.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Nice. How long you been diving?
I've been diving for about 5 years, more or less. I live in Florida. Right now I'm living in Raleigh. I used to dive a lot. I used to dive about 4 times a month. Now I've been doing it like about every 3-6 months. I'm a little bit far from the beach, but now I'm trying to explore a new type of diving. I know that we have some lakes around here, so it sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, there's actually a Mystery Lake, and they're quarries. So they're freshwater quarry dives. Yeah.
Yes, I've never done that before. It seems to be a little bit colder water.
Yep.
That's what I've read. 72, 73. I have a 3mm, so I might be getting a new one, a little bit thicker one. Because diving in cold water is not very comfortable.
So, we got to get back to the discussion. I do have several wetsuits. How big are you? How tall are you?
I am 5'6", 5'7".
Okay. How much do you weigh?
165.
I might have 2 or 3 wetsuits of 5 and 7mm that might fit you. So we'll talk afterwards.
Yes, and we can talk about it.
We'll get back to this. So Greg, on a technical level, what is that? Once again, we're talking about people that would qualify to dive with you, or people you would qualify to dive with you, doing a technical dive, doing what you like to do.
I think technical or not, I think you can look at it and say, do they have the skills? It's the same thing. If they're holding the card, they should have the skills.
Yeah, but we know that's not always necessarily true.
It's not always the case, but look, take a prime example of an advanced open water diver, and I'll use Alex as an example. Maybe he did his dives, but he never did them on a boat. So I don't know. You probably did. If you're in Florida, you probably did a lot of boat diving. That way.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of folks that have never been on a boat. And so now all of a sudden you've got a guy with an advance card who says, hey, I want to dive the Chester Poling. That could be that whole process of getting your gear onto the boat could be an issue. And you see that every once in a while. And I think whether it's recreational or technical, you still have that. You have the guy who's just done deep dives, maybe has never done anything, never penetrated a wreck or never done any cave diving whatsoever. You just have to know their skill level too. And I think it's assumed that they have something going into it. It's assumed. You don't know until you really get in the water.
Okay, so we covered what we would and what we do and what we look for and what we look out for in both recreational and technical diving. So we didn't cover what we look out for. But just as you mentioned, Greg, so advanced or technical diving, what I would look out for would be someone that, as Brian mentioned for basic open water, knows it all. Okay? Because no one knows, especially when you're going into something, be it a wreck or a cave, or when you're going deep on helium, no one knows everything. So you get the guy or girl that claims to know everything. It's got to make you stop a minute and go, okay, well, I know a lot of people that have been diving a whole lot longer and they don't know everything. So how do you qualify for that?
Okay, let me tell you a quick story because I think this is kind of relevant.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a story about the guy who was building a fence and sent his father-in-law into the garage to get a 2x4 stretcher. There's no such thing as a 2x4 stretcher. So there's a quick way. And I remember I was doing a boat dive with, I think, 3 or 4 advanced open water divers. They were getting certified. We were diving the Chester Poling. And another instructor had his folks there. And what he was doing, which I thought was pretty unprofessional, he was talking to my students, but asking them questions that are not, you can't answer them. Like the O-ring for your, for your glove, things like that. Do you have the O-ring that, for your glove? And they're like, what? They think it's something that they should have known, and that throws people off too. And so you're always going to get folks that are going to want to try to test you.
Okay. So going to another level, and the only reason I guess I'm bringing this up is there is a possibility of it. Although it's a slim possibility, there's a possibility of it. So when you're doing an expedition dive, an expedition style dive, as Brian, we just went over in detail, involves a whole lot of people. Now, there's a whole lot of people, and trying to get all those people on the same level is quite hard. You're always going to have someone that's the least experienced diver. So the entire dive or the entire push team, which would be the deepest part of the dive. So the push team is going to dive only to the least experienced diver's level. With that being said, gaining experience, you can have your in-water support. You can have the deck crew who works the boat, shuffles gear. Everything that you're learning is all usable knowledge for being in the water and being part of that expedition. So eventually, you might not be in the water on this dive. Maybe next dive you will, because you've learned all of this and now we're going to let you experience the next step. And you keep progressing like that. Greg, have you been involved or have you heard of any expeditions in that style?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I've never been involved in one. The most I've ever had as a group was 4, to be honest. And it was always 4, and it was typically looking for something very specific. And so, yeah, you had the boat guys who handled the boats and handled everything else. But it's the same concept. Maybe you're only putting 2 people in the water at a time.
Right.
And maybe you're swapping roles. But yeah, I'm nothing more than 4 for me.
Well, Brian and I were on Hank's boat, and you would crew. You're a crew on the boat, but
Yep.
you also got to splash. So everyone rotated. You know what I mean? Being the divers and being the deckhands.
Yep.
So everyone kind of helps everyone else. And by doing that, you learn different types of gear setup.
Sure.
Not everyone dives the same way or with the same gear or with the same light clipped in the same place. So you do learn several different configurations
Yeah.
to dive in. And with people going closed circuit, you also learn what a rebreather looks like, what the different hoses are for, and people ask questions if they see something new. So I guess that's a huge takeaway is if you don't understand something, ask. Because most divers will be happy to educate or inform you on something that they're using or a way that they're diving.
So what scares me is the quiet diver.
Okay.
The one that sits on the boat and doesn't say a word ever. And they're just really quiet. They're putting their stuff together. Well, no,
I was gonna say
I don't know. I think you guys talk, but I've been on a dive with somebody. We were away. We were in the Bahamas somewhere, and this one guy literally didn't talk to anybody. It was really, really bizarre. It was, and I get a little spooked when I'm around folks that don't, mingle.
And see, especially if I'm on a dive with my rebreather, I'm concentrating on that. I'm setting up.
I think you're still going to say hello.
When I first walk on the boat, yes. But
Yeah.
I'm doing my own thing.
Right.
When I'm done, I might kick back, relax, grab my phone, and be open for conversation.
Right.
But
until then, but I think that's a lot of us, though. We're putting our gear together. We're not looking at other people's stuff until our stuff is done.
So, Alex, that might be a great takeaway for you. Normally, our stuff is already set up and ready to go, more or less, and we just bring it onto the boat. But when you're setting your gear up, don't worry about what's going on around you. Focus on what you're doing.
Right.
If you don't, you're going to miss an O-ring that fell off from your regulator, and you're going to be asked out.
Definitely.
Do you have any questions, Alex?
Questions? Yes, maybe I have questions, but it's regarding how's the diving around this area.
Okay.
Because I really don't know the area.
Yep.
I know that the depths are very different to the reefs that we had in Florida. I know we're talking here about 80 plus being like the normal. That's what I think. In Florida, everything was between 30 and 60, and some special reefs we used to go 90, but mostly everything was very shallow.
Okay.
So I don't know the area. So I want to start going into this new thing of lake diving. But I think I need to start getting some gear because of the cold water,
Yep.
and also start to know how the charters work here. Because in Florida, we always, we got into the charter and we got the tanks. We always prepared everything in the boat, and then we got ready. We got groups of 4 or 5 people.
Yep.
Then we went diving. So we always had an instructor with us. So it was a group of 4 or 5, and one instructor per group, and things like that. So I want to start getting to know how everything is done here. I think it should be the same, but the thing is, I've noticed that things change. I've been diving in Ecuador, for example, and it's a completely different thing. I mean, you see groups of 10, and sometimes you don't see instructors, and it's a mess. So I think I want to start looking at it. One thing, I need to get in contact with you. Maybe you can help me out with the right suit. Right? I always use 3mm because I always go into warm water.
Yep.
I've never been in these waters.
So I'm actually about a half hour away from you. I'm in Bailey, North Carolina, which is, like I said, a half hour east of you. So I'm closer to the coast than you. But they actually have an event going on tomorrow at Mystery Lake.
Okay.
So if by all means, if you want to go, it's open for everyone, and it's kind of like a social.
Would be great. Yes.
All right.
You send me the details after after this, and then we can talk about it. I will be very interested to get involved.
Absolutely. Greg, do you have any additional finding a buddy? Do you have anything additional to look for?
Well, I don't know about additional, but I will say that once I was able to find a few steady buddies,
Yep.
it made it so much better. Diving. I really only had, in the end, I really only have a few steady buddies. And
Yep.
that, for me, that was really, I mean, I could call you at any time and say, hey, let's go tomorrow afternoon. You're like, yeah, I've got an hour to spare. And so it was really, really good. And I think we were on the same, it worked out that we were on the same path of where we wanted to go.
Yep.
It was diving. We weren't rushing, whether it was a lake dive, and I like lake diving a lot because,
you don't have to wash gear afterwards.
Not as much. Not as much. But
That's a good thing.
We had a lot of fun lake diving, so there's nothing wrong with that. But it's finding a couple dive buddies that are willing to go at the pace that you're willing to move. That's the way to look at it.
So what about you, Bri? You got any additional tips for finding a dive buddy?
Hanging out at the shops, finding any of the dive clubs. The dive clubs sometimes are sponsored by a shop, so you'll have one club that hangs out at that one shop. You might have another club, well, they kind of hang out at this other shop. But when you're trying to look for one, if you hang out at the shops and hang out wherever the dive clubs may be meeting, most of the time they'll put stuff up on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. If you search for them, you'll be able to find most likely someone else that's, you could say, almost a mirror of you, who's also looking. And that might be a great way to find someone that could end up being a dive buddy for a while. I think we've pretty much hammered home that your dive buddies are going to change as the years go on. But by using that as a resource, the dive shop and the different dive clubs that are around, you really could get paired up with a great buddy for you. What might be a great buddy for you may not be the best buddy for me. We think different, but you know, that's a great way to find somebody and to spend some time talking and see what are they like. Do they have similar interests? Do they have a similar mentality of their diving? Or are they're complete willy-nilly and I would be nervous getting in the water with them? Or no, they got their stuff together and you know, they start talking about, all right, you know, we're going to do this dive in 2 weeks, but let's start putting an idea together. I think that's a great way to find people.
So let me give you a for instance on that one. So we used to have Wednesday night dives. And a lot of times you'd go into the shop and they'd say, oh, yeah, we've got these Wednesday night dives that we do after work. And usually when we call them night dives, they really didn't get into you could stay later when it was dark, but it was typically 5 o'clock or so after work. And people would go down, you'd go to the shop, pick up, you know, get your tanker air or whatever you needed. And then you'd meet at this place, let's say in Stonington or wherever, and you'd go for a dive typically with a little group and you'd get buddied up. Sometimes you'd find a lot of folks would show up without any gear at all. Just show up on a Wednesday night dive and talk to people, you know, and just kind of get to know who's on the Wednesday night dive crew and who's coming, who's not, you know, who's there. And then say, well, you know, listen, can I come next week? And a lot of times you'll find, you know, not a problem at all.
Very cool. Well, guys, we're just about out of time. Alex, thank you very much for hopping on. Sorry you jumped in a little late. This is recorded. It's going to be posted. So you can always go back and watch the beginning part of the video that you missed. If you have any questions, I got to find a way to put email addresses. So if you have questions, feel free to email us, message us, whatever, and we'll do our best to answer.
Where can I find your email?
Actually, if you want to give me your email address.
Yeah, so it's
Before you spit that out,
Yep.
why don't you stop recording?
Stop recording.